शुरू करूं क्या? Hello students, good morning everyone. Today we are going to start a prelim support program, and in this program basically we are trying to focus on prelims, and we actually I will provide you certain key points, key key subjects, right? And when within the subject we will go through certain theme. What are that theme actually important for prelims? So today we'll focus on polity, right? And you know that within polity we will try to understand the trends of preliminary examination of last 5 to 7 years, right? So what are the topics which are very important from the polity, governance and IR governance and IR point of view, right? So basically first we will make list of chapters which are necessary to actually cover, and secondly we will discuss, we will take some objective questions, and through that objective questions we will try to cover that topic. Now if you go through polity, governance and IR, this is the most important part in prelims, and it seems very easy, right? The students are very comfortable with this part, but let me tell you, they do lots of mistake, right? And that actually creates problem, right? Even one question is very important for prelims point of view. So if you look at the few basics, let me first talk about cover polity. What are the topic which you should cover? So first I would like to tell you the historical background. Historical background of Indian constitutionalism. This is the first topic that one should cover, right, for solve polity questions in prelims. Secondly, the second chapter, if I would guess what are the most important chapter from polity, I will talk about preamble. Preamble and basic concepts. Now what are the basic concepts which one student should go through? Now basic concepts like secularism, right? Then socialism, then democracy. Now there are two more words, for example republic, idea of republic and idea of sovereign. That is simple idea that one can understand here. And then apart from these three words, there is equality, the concept of equality, liberty, justice, right? Then fraternity. These basic concepts should be clear for prelims. Now sometimes question actually appears in prelims, and that question is basic, right? Basic understanding of any concept. Like sometimes UPSC focus on liberty, sometimes it focus on justice, sometimes it focus on the relationship between religion and state. Sometimes it's focus on certain democracy, certain types of democracy, right? Now if you look at, so these basic concepts should be clear, and if your basic concepts are clear, you would be able to solve questions from this part, right. So, these are the two topics. Now, we will move to the next topic, right. The next topic one should cover, that is fundamental rights. PPSP and fundamental duty. From this section you can find question appears, question comes each year, at least one or two, sometimes two, sometimes three, right. Now, if you look at this chapter is also important, and after doing that one can move to directly parliament, and one should focus on parliament very carefully, because each year you can see at least two question comes from parliament, right. So, one should focus on parliament, right, and this is a big chapter, right. This is a big chapter, right. One should try to understand Rajya Sabha and the Lok Sabha, right, and the role of the president. The role of the president in the parliamentary democracy, and one should try to understand the members, right, their qualification, disqualification process, right. Then if you look at a speaker, here there are pro tem speaker, right, then you have a speaker, then you have deputy speaker. Now, then there are several provisions, constitutional provisions of the parliament, like for example I am giving you money bill, right. So, one should go through all these bills, right, money bill, then you have financial bill, right. What is difference between money bill and financial bill, whether money bill can be called as a financial bill or not, or whether financial bill includes money bill or not, right. Then you have constitutional amendment bill, right. So, you can see there are bill, then you have ordinary bill, right. Now, one should understand what is these four types of bill are all about, right. Now, there are now look at all these four bills are actually introduced by the government, right. The government introduces this all kind of bill. Now, apart from this four bill, there are another bill called private member bill, right. Private member bills. Now, one should actually focus on this, right. What is private member bill? What are the provisions regarding private member bill, right. So, one should focus, right. One should focus on this all aspects, and then apart from it, one should focus on how budget is passed in the bill, right. How the budget, right. It's called annual financial statement. Now, how annual financial statements are framed, who frames it, now what are the process through which this budget is been passed, right. So, one should know different stages of budgets, right. Within the different stages there are different clause. For example, there is a cut motion, right. There are cut motion. So, one should know different stages of budget. Now, apart from this, within the parliament, now one should understand parliamentary committee. Very carefully. Right. Now, if you look at recently, few parliamentary committee was actually very popular and in news, right? For example, ethics committee. Right. This ethics committee was in news. Now, you should go through ethics committee, right? There are several committee, right? Like for example, public account committee, PSC, right? For example, like estimate committee, right? There is a committee on undertaking. Then there are, departmental related standing committee, department related standing committee. Go through this all, right? Very, wider and deep in this chapter, because these chapters, at least, help you to solve at least 3 to 4 questions, right? Sometimes, more, right? So this chapter is very, very important. Fine. Now, apart from this, that is the 4th chapter that we have enlisted. Now, 5th chapter that one should cover in this for prelims, right, is especially, president. Here in executive, you should only focus on president. Now, what you focus on president? Basically, focus on election, right, and also his power and functions. Right, power and functions. Basically, one should go through ordinance making power. Power of the president, article 1 to 3, right? Because this article was actually very much in news and very much controversial, right? So this are only, in executive one should go to president and not read council of ministers and the prime minister, right? Yeah, especially I will actually talk about here that article 74 and 75 one should go through. You should not ignore these 2 articles, which is very, very important, right? So from executive this is very important and rest you can ignore. Now the next chapter that one should focus on, that is judiciary, right? And in judiciary I would suggest you to go to the local judiciary, or I should say subordinate judiciary. Focus on subordinate judiciary, right, rather than High Court or Supreme Court, right? One can focus on Supreme Court also, basically the constitutional power of the Supreme Court, right? One can focus on High Court also, but focus more on the subordinate judiciary, right? There is a news of All India Judicial Services, right? All India Judicial Services. Now go for this debate and look at which article basically talk about the judicial services. So this is from judiciary, and here you can focus on Lok Adalat, right? Gram Nyayalay, right? Nalsa, right? Then Nalsa, then one can focus on free legal aid, right? So this part of judiciary is very, very important for your prelims, right? Now what are the next that chapter that you should focus for prelims? The next topic that you cover for prelims, I would suggest seventh topic, that local government in 5th schedule and 6th schedule. Similarly, if you look at, we have local government, right, and here if you look at, focus on 73rd and 74th CAA, Constitutional Amendment Act, and then you focus on 5th schedule. Because 5th schedule is a very important part for your preparation, right? Don't ignore it. Try to understand 5th schedule areas, right? Mark out which are the states which come under the 5th schedule areas, right? What is the PESA Act basically? Read PESA, read FRA, Forest Right Act very carefully, right? Try to understand which are the agency, which ministry basically, actually responsible to, to implement the PESA Act or Forest Right Act, right? Ministry of Tribal Affairs, right? So now you should focus on 6th schedule. 6th schedule. Now you know that here the 4 states we have, right, and you say that you have 4 states, AMTM, A stands for Assam, M stands for Meghalaya, T stands for Tripura, and M stands for Mizoram. Right? Try to actually understand 5th schedule area, the power of governor, for in 5th schedule, power of the president, related to the 6th schedule area. So this should be the focus point, right? 7th topic that we have talked about, which is these all topics are very important, for your prelims. Now, if you the 8th topic which I'll talk about, I'll talk about election commission. Why is it so? Because if you see, election commission was in debate this year, right? So you should try to understand the Supreme Court judgment, right? Supreme Court judgment, recent law passed by the Parliament regarding recruitments of chief election commissioner and other election commissioners. Now, see, election commission and RPA Act, there is one law basically through which election commission regulates election, right? So one can read electoral law, which is very important regarding electoral law. And if you know that we have electoral law, right, apart from, right, and we have RPA Act, Representation of People Act, right? We have Representation of People Act, (1950), and we have also RPA Act 1951. I should, actually I will suggest you to go through both, but focus on more on RPA Act 1951, right? So these are the topics For the last topic which I suggest, I will little press to you, that Major Constitutional Amendment Act. Major Constitutional Amendment Act that you can go through, right. So, this part would be, now come to the governance. We have seen that 9 chapters are very important, right, and majority of the question will fall from this part, right. So, first, in polity I would repeat a historical background of Indian constitutionalism. Second, preamble and basic concepts like equality, liberty, justice, fraternity, secularism, socialism, democracy, rule of law, right. These all basic concepts one should know. Then fundamental rights. You know that we have 6 sets of rights and one should focus on 6 sets of rights, right, and several judgment, constitutional provision and so on and so forth, right. Then one should actually focus on DPSP, right, and then fundamental duty. And then सीधा आपको नहीं पढ़ना है फेडरलिज्म को अवॉइड कर सकते हैं. Now you should directly jump on parliament and here you should go through different provisions of the parliament. Now then one can cover, you can come to executive and directly touch president, right. Now one can come to the judiciary and directly actually come to the subordinate judiciary. Then one should read local government. Here in the local government one should go through the local government in the general states, local government in 5th schedule area, local government in 6th schedule area. And then election commission, because election commission had been in news recent year, so one should go through it, right. And then the major constitutional amendment acts, right, that would be actually sufficient for. Now if you look, UPSC asked 25 questions which is very hard even in the polity. So this whatever I have told you to touch polity part, it will help you to solve 75% questions from the prelims. But I would suggest you, right, to do the same 75%, not touch the miscellaneous questions, right. It is not that all the 100% questions will come from what I have suggested you. No, not at all, right. There will be 25% questions which would be the kind of miscellaneous. UPSC may ask question from any part of the syllabus, right. And let me tell you, we are not so strong, right, to solve that type of question. So better avoid that type of question, right. Now come to the governance. Now in governance I would suggest you to focus on government policies and programs. Now you will say that sir, there are vast, there are policies and programs which are very vast in nature, which is big, right, very large. Now which policies and programs we should focus on? Let me tell you. Now I will suggest you to go to the ministry website and download 2 report. One is Ministry of Women Child Development. This ministry has actually published report from report in 2023 after 2019. So read this report. You may take 3 hours to read that report, not more than that. And then Ministry of Social Justice. Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. Right. Again here you have to read report, right. And in this ministry you can find constitutional report. In this report, two reports, you can find constitutional provisions, right, constitutional provisions for particular community. For example, Minister of Women Child Development deals with women and child, women and children. So basically you can find here several policies and programs for children and programs for women. Minister of Social Justice basically deals with a few community like SCs, STs, OBCs, right, and then PWDs, persons with disabilities, right, and then LGBTQs, IA plus, and denotified tribe, and you, let me tell you, this report you can finish in 3 hours, not more than that. Now each community you can focus on. So for example, you can focus on scheduled caste, SC, and you can outline, you know, the constitutional provision, you can focus on constitutional provisions, you can focus on recent policies and programs like, you know, Dalit entrepreneurship, the government wants to promote, you know, Dalit entrepreneurship, right. Then you can apart from policies and programs, you can focus on commissions, but you know, if you know, commissions are not so important, right. So this, right, apart from this, right, one can focus on, you know, the self-help group like civil society, right, law actually that regulates civil society, like for example Apsara. Apsara is a law, Foreign Contribution Regulation Act. One can focus on this law, and this law will help you, right, to actually understand the civil society questions. Self-help group. Now then yeah, microfinancial institution, that would be important. Now that is the from governance part, not more, right, because if you look at from governance, you can find sometimes one question, sometimes two questions, right, but of course 3 hours you need to focus on Ministry of Women, Children Development, Child Development Ministry, then 3 hours you have to focus on Ministry of Social Justice, right, and empowerment, and through these 6 hours you can just try to, it will help you more in the mains, right, and of course it can also help you in claims. Now come to IR. Now there is a vast, if you look at international relation in itself, it is a very vast subject, right. How can you actually focus on what are the topics that we can presume that question may come? We are all presuming it, right. We are not, I am not telling you that 100% everything will come from here. No, we are just presuming, and then we are supporting you that focus on these areas, right. And prelims is all about your smartness, right, your work, your smart work, your IQ, right. So in international relation, let me tell you let me point out few points. You focus on G20 that India, you know, chaired this year. So focus on G20, you know, events, right. Now secondly, I would talk about, you know, Palestine-Israel war, right, Palestine-Israel war. So if you look at here, war, there are two wars going on. One is, Ukraine and Russia, right, and another is Israel and Palestine, right. Here you should focus on actually the bordering states. For example, Israel and Palestine, and you can see that the border states, which are the border states which makes border with home like Jordan, Egypt, right, Iran, right. For example, the Houthi, the Yemen, you look at the Yemen, which actually shares border with which country, right. So basically, and that is very much very much nominal. You should not go into deep, but certain that type of question you can focus on geographical part, right. If you look at last year, question was asked from from Afghanistan, so surrounding or bordering areas of Afghanistan. Last year question was from Ukraine, right, the bordering area of Ukraine. This time maybe question from the bordering area of Palestine, right. So one should focus on the war now, and one should also focus on the environmental summit or summit on environment. Right, basically COP28 that was held in Saudi Arabia, right. So one should focus on this. Apart from it, I would not suggest you to go more touch, go to touch more things, just invest less time, because IR is a very vast and we don't know which part, but yes, as trend that we can capture from the trend, go through the Palestine-Israel war particularly, right. Look, Houthi, who is a Houthi, what America is responding to Houthi, right. What is Red Sea? You know that Indian shipyard was basically attacked by terrorist organization, right. Read Hamas, read about Hamas, right. Read about Hamas in detail, right, so that you can actually correct, right. It's because prelims is all about facts, right. So these are the these are the topics that one should cover for prelims, right. And we have seen, right. Now anything that you can ask me, and I can answer you, right. Now we will move to one by one. This is a very short program, right? How we can help you in prelims, right. And in short program we are trying our best to help you out, right, to target exact point in prelims, right. And in this few classes we will talk about, or I will talk about basically polity, governance and international relation. Now come to the first topic, right. Now look at the first topic, historical background of Indian constitutionalism, right. First try to understand constitutionalism, and then we will see that in an historical background in Indian context. Right? Now look at what do you mean by constitutionalism. Constitutionalism refers to limited government. Limited government. Basically what constitution does, right? Constitution limits the power of the government. Apart from, there are, it talks about DPSP, it talks about fundamental rights, right. It actually talks about the structure, organization of public institution, right. But basically constitutionalism, is a belief that government should be limited, right. Constitutionalism is a belief that government should be limited, and we should run society, right. We should run the state according to some written document, some written rules, norms, right, regulations, right, and that actually governs the society, not the personal arbitrary power, not any person, but the constitution, which is basically a document, a living document, not static. It is a living document. What do you mean by the living document? Living document means, it is changing in nature. It changes with the time, right. For example, if you look at our constitution in 1950, it was different. Now if you look at Indian constitution today, it is different, right. For example, if you see Indian constitution at the eve of independence, it had only 8 schedule. Now you have 12 schedule. Now if you look at the eve of independence, constitution had only 395 articles. Now it has more than 411 articles, right. Now if you look at the amendments was very important part in Indian constitution, and basically the amendment to the constitution actually kept constitution alive, because we are changing our constitution to the Constitutional Amendment Act. So if you look at, so that is constitutionalism, I think. So it is a living document, right. Constitution is a belief. That government, that society as well as government should run their function, should run their administration based on written rules and regulation, right. Government should be limited, right, and that is actually constitutionalism. Now look at the historical background of Indian constitutionalism. Now if you see the Indian constitutionalism, in India, we have constitution which is supreme, but this constitution was not a product of one day. Our constitution is not a product of one day. This constitution has evolved, right, and it has historical antecedent, right. It has historical antecedent, and we have seen there are many act, right, many act, right, Charter Act or Government of India Act that was passed by in the colonial time by British government. So we can see that Indian constitutionalism is not a product of an accident. We have, Indian can divide Indian constitutionalism before 1947 and after 1947, or I see 1946. Why 1946? Because the Constituent Assembly, and after 1946, or I say 1949. Let me tell you, 26 November 1949, the day of adoption. Now before 1956, we can see there are many acts. For example, Regulating Act, Act 1773. Now this act basically was the first in order to regulate India, right, by the company. And apart from that, if you look at, then there are Pitts Act, right. Then you can see that Charter Act, right. Then you can see that there are Government of India Act, Charter Act 1813, 1833, right. Government of India Act, right. And you can here you see in the 1909, 1919 and 1935 and 1947. So, one should actually focus on this part. Why one should focus? You can get one question at least from this part. After 1949, and here the story of Constituent Assembly started. Here the story of the Indian Assembly started, which framed the Indian Constitution, right. And basically that Constitution has different chapters, right, and that different chapters basically deals with different theme, right, of society as well as individual as well as of the government. So, that is very important. Now, today we will focus on this, and let us go through few questions, right. Now, and tomorrow we will focus on the preamble and other part, right. Now, look at, I hope it is visible to you, the questions, right. If it is visible, then here the question is, look at, in the context of Regulating Act 1773, consider the following statement. I talked about the Regulating Act 1773. This was the first regulating act or the first act which started controlling India, administrating India, right. And you see that here there are several statements. Now, you have to identify which statement are basically correct, right, or how many statements are correct, how many are false. Now, it designated Governor General as the Governor General of Bengal, right. So, it is correct, right. And who was the first Governor General of Bengal? Warren Hastings. Warren Hastings was the first Governor General of Bengal. Now, it prohibited East India Company personnel from doing trade with the local people. Yes, if you look at this regulating act, basically trying to regulate East India Company, right, and its functions. So, basically this regulating act prohibited East India Company staff to trade with the local people, right, and the personal trade. No, only the company will do the trade, not the staff on personal level. Now, the third, so if you find this statement is also correct, right. The next is, it abolished trade monopoly of the East India Company. We know that it did not abolish trade monopoly of the East India Company. East India Company was the only company from Britain which was actually doing trade with India, right. So, we know that East India Company which was actually doing trade with India, and it had monopoly, right. It had monopoly till 1813. After 1813, you can see that it monopoly actually gone, right, or it actually lost monopoly to trade with India. Now, if you look at the next question, yes, now come to the answer. We see that this is wrong, third is wrong, first and 2 is correct. Now, look at, you have to see the question, which one of the statements given below are correct. Now, you can see that 1 and 2 are correct, 1 and 2. You find 1 and 2 A. So, here A would be the correct answer for this question. Now, you have to be little analytical so that you can understand question, right. Now, let me move to another question on this one. Now, look at this question number 3, right. Now, the provisions to issue ordinance in Indian Constitution is based on scheme provided in. Now, you know ordinance, right. It is basically temporary legislation, right. Temporary legislation. Now, who had power of ordinance? Executive. How? So, ordinance is a executive legislation, we can say. Now, do you think that if you see article 1, 2, 3, which deals with the ordinance power in the present constitution, now what is the origin? Now, look at that is the question basically. What is the origin of ordinance in the Indian constitution, right? Is it that the Indian constitution borrowed it from another country, or was it something, you know, some act, right, or some, you know, charter actually provided that? Look at here, you have Morley-Minto Reform Act. Did it talk about ordinance? No. Montague-Chelmsford Act? No. Indian Council Act 1861? Yes. Indian Council Act 1861 basically provided ordinance, right, to the you know, that time there was a executive, right. That time there was a viceroy, right, and viceroy actually had executive power, and then they also viceroy had achieved this legislative power, right. And you can see that executive legislation is still persisting in the constitution, that is called ordinance. Right. I hope clear to you. Now, let me move to the next question. Look at the question number 4. With reference to the Government of India Act 1935, consider the following statement. Now, the Act provided for the establishment of the All India Federation. It introduced bicameralism in 6 out of the 11 provinces. The residuary power were given to the viceroy. Now, look at the Act provided establishment of All India Federation. It is talking about Government of India Act 1935. Now, look at this Government of India Act 1935. You know, it had actually recommended federation, right, as it provided list 1, you know, list 1, list 2 and list 3. Now, that is still list continue in the present Indian constitution, right. You know, 7th schedule, where you have union list, you have a state list, you have concurrent list, right. Look at it introduced, so this is correct, it introduced bicameralism in 6 out of 11 provinces. Now, if you look at bicameralism at union level, you know, bicameralism, what do you mean by bicameralism? First, you should understand what is bicameralism. Bicameralism means the law-making body should have 2 houses, right. Bicameralism means the law-making, you know, body that we call legislature should have two houses, should have two houses. That is called bicameralism, right? Now, if you look at, like for example, parliament. Indian parliament has two houses, the Lok Sabha and the Raj Sabha. Now, if you look at, at a union level, bicameralism was introduced in 1919. If I see bicameralism, at union legislature, Government of India Act 1919 provided bicameralism, but not at the state level, not at the state level. At the state level, Government of India Act 1935 provided, at the state level, Government of India Act 1935 had provided bicameralism at state level. Of course, there was a 6 states, and that still continue. The majority of 6 still continue with the bicameralism, except Bengal. Bengal had bicameralism, but it abolished bicameralism in 1969. Apart from it, if you look at other provinces like Bihar, it had bicameralism from 1935. If you look at Uttar Pradesh, it has bicameralism since 1935. So, this question is also correct. Now, the residuary power were given to the viceroy. Now, what is this residuary power? Now, if you look at, the power had been divided into, several parts. First is called the union power, and that is provided in the list 1. If you look at many items listed in the list 1, then many items listed in the list 2 on which state has power, that is called a state list, and then many items on which both state excuse me. On many items, both state and center has a power, and there are any item which is not listed either in state list, union list, or concurrent list is called residuary item. Now, residuary item was given in the viceroy. If you look at residuary power today, is at the hand of center. So, this is also correct, right? So, all three are correct. All three statements are correct. Now, let me move to the next question. Look at question number 5. And question number 5 is basically, which one of the following is not a feature of the Charter Act 1853? It deprived the power of the Governor General of Bombay and Madras. It is correct or not correct? It is correct. It ended the activity of East India Company as a commercial body, right? It was a feature. It introduced an open competition for civil services. It introduced, no, it recommended basically. This is wrong. It made Governor General of Bengal as Governor General of India, right? So, this is correct. So, C is basically not true. C is not true. C is the correct answer. Now, let me move to the two more question. Look at question number 7 here, and question is, which one of the following is not correct about the Indian Council Act 1909? Look at question. The size of the central legislative not correct, right? You must mark it the word not. Sometimes what happens? We read it as a correct, and then what we done? There are several correct statements. One of them you fill. That is the mistake you do, and therefore you must read question very carefully. Now, let me read question. Which one of the following is not correct about the Indian Council Act 09? Size of the central legislative was increased. It allowed members of the legislative council to raise supplementary question. It legalized communalism in India. It established dual government in India. Let me tell you, dual government in India was established by Paste India Act and also Government of India Act 1919. So, I think this is not correct, and D would be the correct answer, right. Look at the question, next question, right. Look at initially separate electorate was announced by which? Separate electorate. Initially separate electorate was announced by Lord Minto, Lord Simon Commission, Ramsay MacDonald and Lord Mountbatten. Here if you look at, it is talking about the announcement of the separate electorate, rather than implementation of the separate electorate, right. So, you know that here Lord Minto is also here, which basically provided in 1909 separate electorate for Muslim, right. But if you look at here, Ramsay MacDonald was also given separate electorate to depressed classes, right. So, answer either would be A or C. Now, not B and D, and then here you will have to conclude what would be the correct answer, Lord Minto or Ramsay MacDonald. Now, it is talking about initially separate electorate was announced by, right. So, separate electorate basically much popular in case of the Ramsay MacDonald, right. C would be the correct answer. Now, look at the another questions. Look at question number 11. Question says, consider the following statements about the Charter Act of 1813. The Act abolished trade monopoly of the East India Company. I told you that, yes, right. It allowed Christian missionaries to come to India. Yes, this is correct. Charter Act 1813 actually allowed missionaries to come to India. The Act continued a monopoly of East India Company over trade in tea and trade with China. Yeah, this is also correct. So, look at all three questions are correct. So, answer would be C. Now, move to the next question. Now, look at question number 14 here, and you read, the Government of India Act of 1919 clearly defined separation of power between judiciary and legislature, the jurisdiction of central and provincial government, the power of Secretary of State for India and the Viceroy, none of the above. Now, basically the jurisdiction of the central and provincial government. So, B would be answer, right. We have seen. Now, look at the next question. Question number 15. In the federation established by the Government of India Act 1935, residuary power were given to Governor General, right, rather than a federal legislature. So, answer would be B. Now, come to the question, next question. Now, look at here which of the following statement is not correct about Constitutional Assembly of India? It was formulated by the Cabinet Mission Plan, correct? Its members were directly elected? No, its member was also nominated as well as elected. Here you can see Dr. Sachidanand was first person, correct? Princely Estates nominated the representative. Here you see this be used. So we have seen different questions which actually based on different charters, different act, Government of India Act, right, regulating act, right. So now this the way you should do practice, right. So that is for today. See you tomorrow, and with tomorrow I will talk about preamble, right, preamble and basic concepts. And we will look at different questions, right, a set of questions we will solve together. Right? So this way we are trying to help you. See you tomorrow.